What is your only comfort in life and in death? This question opens our fourth entry, the Heidelberg Catechism. Now, this German one today is a little different than the ones that we've seen before, as it's specifically a catechism as opposed to a creed or a confession. And what that means is it's written in a question and answer format rather than the narrative structure that we've seen so far. Interestingly, our entry today is the first Reformed confessional document known to have been used in North America. And please note, my German is terrible and my Latin is non-existent, so apologies in advance for the probable butchering of names coming up here. The Catechism was written by Caspar Olevianus, a preacher in the city of Heidelberg, and Zacharias Ursinus, a professor of theology, both at the time young men in their 20s. Olevianus and Ursinus wrote the Catechism in 1562, and it was published in January of 1563. The question and answer format in this catechism deals with three major themes of the Christian life: sin, redemption, and thankfulness. These three themes permeate the series of 129 questions that are actually organized around the 52 weeks of the year so that they can easily be incorporated into the life of a worshiping community. Within these central themes, we find topics including misery, deliverance, the three persons of God, the sacraments, gratitude, the Ten Commandments, and the Lord's Prayer. And each question, which is meant to be read, either by a teacher of the catechism class for students or by a pastor for the congregation, includes a specific and detailed answer that, as of the German third edition of 1562, includes biblical citations. And upon hearing each of these questions, the student or the parishioner would respond accordingly. Unlike the previous documents where the response was communal, this catechism is particularly personal. These are questions that are asked of you specifically, not of us per se. And thus the answers are meant to be those answers that you give in response to the questioner, and thus from your faith. Its theology is, as our Book of Confessions notes, quotes, both Catholic, universal in appeal, and evangelical, setting forth the gospel of Jesus Christ. The Catechism was written at a time of tremendous strife in the Holy Roman Empire. The various states comprising of what we would now know as Germany were split along religious lines, some remaining Roman Catholic, some becoming Lutheran, and a few interested in what was happening in Switzerland with the works of Calvin and those around him. This being the 16th century, these religious divisions often led to military conflict. The Palatate, headed by the Elector Frederick III, became a focal point of some of the strife. Frederick, who had been raised Catholic, was the nephew of the previous elector, Otto Henry, who had been Protestant. And Frederick converted to Lutheranism upon marrying his spouse, Princess Maria, who was very Lutheran. He promised her that he would read the Bible every day, and in so doing developed a faith that led him to be known eventually as Frederick the Pious. Now, almost immediately into his new reign, the Lutheran pastor of one of the churches in Heidelberg got into it over communion with his assistant pastor, who happened to be Zwinglian, that is a student of one of the Swiss reformers. And that led to shenanigans at the local theological college, and this assistant pastor was awarded a theology degree, which made the head pastor incredibly furious, and this ended up stirring up a lot of trouble in the Palatate, leading Frederick to expel both men. But how could he bring peace? In this part of Germany, the conflict between Protestants, Calvinists versus Lutherans, felt far more significant even than that between Protestants and Catholics, at least in this particular moment. And Frederick reaches out to a colleague of Luther's, the current head of the Lutheran Church, Philip Melanchthon, who responded, quote, "In all things, seek peace and moderation," end quote. So Frederick's spouse worried that he was slipping from his Lutheran theological tradition, and so encouraged him to hold these debates between Lutheran and Calvinist scholars. And in doing so, he found that his own theology shifted more towards a Calvinist position. But he never forgot Melanchthon's advice to seek peace and moderation. And so he sought to create a new statement of faith for himself and for his state, one that would unite the Protestants in his region and perhaps even throughout the empire and beyond. And he chose the very charismatic pastor Olevianus and this rising scholar Ursinus, who was probably the primary author, to write this new catechism in order to unite the people. So just like we've seen with the Nicene and Scots confessions, this catechism was meant both to teach and to unite. And it does just that. It becomes really popular throughout European Protestantism. It's biblical, it's ecumenical, it focuses on Christ, it's personal, it's practical, and it's devotional. It also got Frederick into a lot of trouble with the Emperor Maximilian II. He was actually accused of heresy, but through the intervention of a group of, interestingly enough, Lutheran princes, as well as Frederick's great kindness and piety, he ended up being cleared of all charges, and the catechism went on to great prominence. It's been a long morning. So friends, what is your only comfort in life and in death? That I am not my own, but belong, body and soul, in life and in death, to my faithful Savior, Jesus Christ. We'll see you next time.